Welcome to my channel, or welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to talk about something called tocophobia. It is the pathological fear of pregnancy and can lead to avoidance of childbirth. It can be classified as primary or secondary. Primary is morbid fear of childbirth in a woman who has no previous experience of pregnancy. Some of the causes of tocophobia can even stem from hearing about birth experiences that maybe aren't so positive. A lot of people reached out to me about this phobia. Some folks had dealt with something called hyperemesis or HG, and that can cause a lot of vomiting and sickness during pregnancy. So those who have dealt with HG maybe have a phobia of pregnancy after that first experience. Some others who reached out to me said that they had a phobia of vomiting like I do. So that automatically makes them afraid of something like pregnancy, which can cause vomiting. There's fear of inadequate pain management and fears around childbirth or health problems from pregnancy. This phobia can be a lot more intense than it sounds. Some may even choose to terminate a pregnancy because of this phobia. Some may really want children, but this phobia can be so debilitating that they're just not comfortable with getting pregnant or giving birth. Folks with this phobia opt to have a cesarean. Today I'll be sharing a pregnancy and childbirth story. The person in this story was able to overcome their phobia, and that's why I wanted to share this story. It's a podcast. The podcast is called Fear Free Childbirth. The parent or birther in the story's name is Cee Fee Dunn. Fair use. This is educational. I'm not gonna share everything word for word, but I am gonna share a lot of important things that I heard in this podcast and discuss it a little bit with you all. So the birther in this story says that they had body image issues to start with, and they didn't want to be pregnant when they were trying with their husband or partner, but they also wanted to at the same time. She said that she found out at 5 days pregnant and felt this like impending doom. She took a test with her friend on the phone and it came back positive, and she said that she took like 45 pregnancy tests. She told her husband by surprising him and hiding the pregnancy test, and when he found it, she wasn't as happy as I guess she expected to be. There was just no joy. And this would kind of go on for most of her pregnancy. She was kind of in shock and didn't want herself to feel excited. She explained her shock to feel almost like a grief. And grief can be kind of numbing, so that totally makes sense. Her and her husband went on vacation, I guess, to celebrate, and she also just felt dead inside at the vacation. So she just couldn't seem to get excited for this pregnancy. I just want to let you know that it's normal if you don't feel connected with your pregnancy right away, or happy, or like you think we're supposed to feel. A lot's going on in your body. Maybe it was a shock. Maybe you don't feel ready. For whatever reason, you don't have to feel what you think you have to feel, which is like excited and joy. I think that kind of makes a lot of people feel guilty at the end of the day because they don't feel how they think everyone is supposed to feel. She also explained that she considered termination out of fear, just fear during the pregnancy and the outcome, I believe that she said. And she continued to explain these feelings of it feeling dreadful and just not excited, and that she was robbed of herself. She would try to get excited, but then she would squash it right back with that grief and those feelings. And sometimes I really think that we just need to let ourselves feel what our body's feeling, even if it is grief, even if it is numbing. Sometimes we need to explore that. So this feeling of numbness and shock and grief and lack of joy lasted for most of her pregnancy. She also had a past with an eating disorder, but mindfulness helped her overcome it. Knowing that told her that maybe she could get through this. But it had a lot to do with the horror stories from other people's pregnancies and the realization that this was consuming her. She Googled Fear of Pregnancy podcast and found this one, which is exactly what I did. This was a very good podcast and I highly suggest everyone to read it. I sent it to 2 or 3 clients recently because it was so good. I'll link it in the description below, but I really suggest you listen to this podcast. She told her doctor about her phobia, and her doctor was really dismissive about how she was feeling. The doctor said to her, and I quote, "Did you not think of this before pregnancy?" So before this pregnancy, she thought maybe she could deal. She didn't know what to expect, but she was just terrified of her body. We don't know what a pregnancy is going to be like. Every pregnancy is different. We don't know what to expect. And whenever you're a first-time birther or parent, it's the unknown. You don't know what to expect. She even tried to feel happy, but she couldn't. And it's sad that people don't get that validation and they don't feel heard by their own providers. Phobias aren't often widely discussed or talked about because there's such a stigma around them. She said that it felt like it was her hormones and these emotions on a hormonal level, which really makes sense because I can feel in my body when my hormones are making me feel a certain way. I can feel that shift in my body, and I think those of us who are really aware of our bodies know what I'm talking about. She describes it as one of her most darkest places. She wanted to make changes, but she knew that it would be hard work. Hard to do the work. It's hard to get to that good place. It's a lot of work to do. But she did start working towards it, and I'm so proud of her, and I wish that she would have given herself a little bit more credit, but I think that she did wonderful. So I'll go on to explain how she kind of overcame these feelings. She asked herself, what can I do in this moment? She began to follow different people from this podcast, seeing how their lives turned out, I guess after their pregnancies or throughout their pregnancies. She saw that like there's hope. Like people who are afraid, really afraid, and have this phobia, yet overcome it and kind of face their fears and beat this phobia in a way. So I think that that gave her a lot of reassurance to know that she wasn't alone. Sometimes all it takes is to just know that you're not alone. So she also started to read and listen to positive birth stories. In our society, we hear a lot of negative things about birth. We hear about epidurals not working, pain management not working, baby came out sunny side up and how painful it was, or I couldn't handle it, I had to get the epidural immediately. We hear about things that don't necessarily encourage physiologic birth, and there's nothing wrong with medication at all. But we just hear these things and it makes birth sound that much more terrifying. Positive birth stories are definitely something that every pregnant person should listen to and hear, and also try to eliminate the sources of those who are sharing a lot of unsolicited negative stories with them. And there's nothing wrong with sharing your birth trauma, but usually when someone's newly pregnant, it's kind of a bad idea to just walk up to them and share your bad experience. She decided to say this, and maybe you all could use this too if someone approaches you with a negative birth story and you didn't ask. She said, I would love to hear it, but I'm not in the place to listen. And I think that that's wonderful advice for people who are pregnant and maybe don't want to hear those stories. She also sought out a doula, hired a doula, and began educating herself. It's so important, no matter what kind of birth you're having, no matter if you want a medical birth, or if you want medicine at your birth, or you want other options. Just know about your body and what's going on. It can help a lot with fear, or it helps me a lot with my fears to know what's happening. I feel like she really looked inward and she was doing the work this whole time. She watched a lot of YouTube videos and people giving birth on YouTube, got into hypnobirthing, got into acupuncture, she got a therapist. She also began to open up that birth could be beautiful, and that felt really untrue to her. So she was doing a lot of internal work, and if something feels untrue to you, it's okay to back up from it and it's just not helpful to you. That's why I like to suggest something called a balance statement. It's where you have this spectrum and you have the most positive thing that you can think about birth. What is the most positive thought that you want to have about birth? What is the most negative thought that you have about birth? Where can you meet in the middle? What feels the most true to you? So that's something that I like to suggest to people who might be afraid of birth. I also mentioned that people will research strollers a lot, but not that many people research birth. You got a lot of flack, I guess, for just being a birth nerd. It's really good to be educated about something that's gonna, happen no matter what. Like if you're pregnant, you are going to give birth some way. It's totally okay to learn about that because you're going through it. So she began to put that belief down and work towards what she wanted, and thought people are afraid, but they're still told to be grateful for being pregnant. And she struggled with that. When she began to share more about what she was learning and researching and what she was feeling about her pregnancy, people would dismiss her and discredit what she was feeling. She said her feelings weren't really warranted because they should feel happy and feel lucky. Some people can't get pregnant and have dealt with loss, and she said it almost felt like a competition for who had it worse. She explained that her fear around pregnancy was removed from someone who had a miscarriage. It had nothing to do with their personal experience, which is a tragic loss. But at the same time, this is still her personal experience and what she's going through. So we need to listen to that and hear that, because we don't know what emotional and mental things she has to deal with on a daily basis during a pregnancy like this and with the fear. So she just couldn't connect to the baby during her pregnancy. And she heard that her baby could be marinating in her emotions. She changed her belief and liked the idea that her baby was completely safe and doesn't have wants or needs. It's almost like a heaven in the womb, she described. She could connect to her placenta. It was doing so much work for her. It was keeping her baby sustained and nourished and helping her baby grow. So she really respected everything that her placenta had done for her pregnancy. And I think that it's awesome that she was able to connect in some way. That takes a lot of inner work, which she was obviously doing. Even if you're not able to connect, that's still okay. I feel like we have these ideas of pregnancy where it's supposed to be the happiest time of your life. Maybe it should be, but I mean, that's just not the case for everyone. With life and other circumstances, it's impossible to be happy and joyous all the time. So it's okay to have bad feelings. It doesn't make you a bad person. So a few weeks before she gave birth, she said, "My body wouldn't let me have this baby until I connected. Something lifted and she felt all the oxytocin rush into her body, and her fog of doom had lifted." She was planning for a home birth, and suddenly one day she felt period cramps and was actually excited, which is amazing to hear from someone who had been so nervous and just sad throughout their pregnancy. That has to be an amazing feeling, to feel joy and excitement and that connection, and to be excited that you're in labor whenever maybe you feared it for so long. She could feel that something was stirring in her uterus and maybe she was gonna give birth. She also went to her acupuncturist and got fear release needles, which I've never heard of. Helped her, so maybe it can help you. And as soon as she got back home, her waters ruptured. So her waters had broken. She knew for sure that she was in labor. Her husband began blowing up the birth pool, and her doula, birth team, and best friend showed up. She had the TV on, candles lit. She thought she might want music, but ended up not playing any music. And she said that she was on her knees, mostly leaning onto the sofa. She couldn't get in the right headspace to do hypnobirthing. She loved her contractions and sensations that she was feeling in her body. She leaned into them and went with the flow of them. Her birth plan included no negative talk or language around her birth. She was feeling primal with these intense period-like cramps, which I explain birth in the same way. It just feels like a really strong period that progresses and gets a little more intense as time goes on. I didn't want to do anything to slow labor, but also wanted to try the pool. So she got in the pool. She said the pool was amazing. She even began to pleasure herself in the pool. So if you haven't heard of Orgasmic Birth, I'll pop up a short article right here and maybe you can go find it, and I'll definitely put the link in the description below. Orgasmic Birth is kind of bringing pleasure into giving birth, and that's how some people relieve sensations that they're feeling. She began to feel her baby descend as she was doing this, but kind of got uncomfortable with pleasuring herself in front of everyone. 30 hours of birth, it started to not go to plan. Her husband got in the pool with her, and that's when things kind of took a turn. There were too many people there, and she stopped pleasuring herself. And her husband said, "She's opening up," and then everything stopped. The baby stopped descending, and she felt him go into a very funny position, and then felt back labor. Pushed for 3 hours at home and worried about transfer, so she agreed to an exam. Originally, cervical exams and checks weren't the plan, but in this case, she decided maybe she should. She physically felt herself closing up. She said she felt like she was fully dilated before she started to close up. Only 7 centimeters dilated, her midwife said. And I remember her laughing at the word only, because 7 centimeters is a lot of work. That is almost transition. She knew that she had been fully dilated before this, and then she decided to transfer. She was asked to transfer, and she wanted to sit with that for a minute and not just go in and transfer. She really wanted to sit with what she was feeling, and it's so good to sit with your emotions. She felt heartbroken and she sobbed, and there was just a change of plans, so that's why she was crying. It wasn't because she was in pain, it was just the change of plan. She transferred and got the epidural. Suddenly her happiness in labor went away. She kept imagining in her head that she needed a cesarean. She said theater in the podcast, which I think means operating room. I'm in the US and she may be in the UK. She refused unnecessary interventions. She had educated herself so much previous to this birth that she knew what she needed and didn't need, and knew what was unnecessary, and knew that she had rights. That education helped in so many ways. Finally, their baby did end up needing help, but not by a cesarean. She just needed an episiotomy to help get the baby out. because she had been pushing for several hours at that point. At home it was 3 hours, and then by the time she was at the hospital it had been more than 3 hours. The episiotomy wasn't as bad as she expected. She left her birth feeling empowered by her decisions and that she did everything that she could. She really did. She went through the whole list. She advocated for herself in the best ways that she possibly could have. She did amazing. At the end of the day, we must respect everyone's reproductive health choices because their experience isn't ours. No one should be forced into pregnancy or to give birth. No one should be dismissed when they talk about their fears around these things, but unfortunately those things happen. I feel like there's this great giant pressure from society for uterus havers to just carry and raise children and to be incubators, and that's mostly all they think that we should do, and we should be happy while we do it. That's not everyone's life goal or plan, and that's okay. To those watching who deal with this phobia, please know that you aren't alone, and I hope that this video was helpful to you in some way. Thank you for watching, subscribe if you'd like, and I'll see you next time.